So I want to share with you a technique today that I recently picked up because I was getting a lot of questions about it on Instagram. It's the technique of focus stacking. And this is going to be especially helpful if you've ever run into a situation where you're shooting a subject and you just want a little bit more of the subject in focus. You feel like you're limited in terms of the depth of field, that maybe you've taken the aperture as high as you want and adjusting that hasn't still fixed the problem. Focus stacking might be the solution. So to start us off, what is focus stacking? Effectively, what we're going to be doing here today and what the technique requires is you take multiple images of a scene, of a setup, and you're shifting the focus from shot to shot and then combining all of those images together in post. So what this enables us to do, for example, here with this cocktail, is that we can get all of the cocktail in focus from the front of the cocktail to the back of the cocktail, but that I can still get that really nice creamy bouquet and that softness in the atmosphere by using a wider aperture. Now, this technique is applicable in a wide variety of situations. For us as food photographers, it's really helpful for drinks as well as product photography. Absolutely, you'll see this a lot in macro photography because if we remember, the nearer that we are to our subject, the more pronounced the depth of field is. So you might be super close up to a subject at f/16 and you're like, I still don't have enough focus. So focus stacking can solve that problem. You'll also see this used a lot in landscape photography. So I'll link some other really helpful tutorials on that down below in case you want to go outdoors and play around with focus stacking. But I'm going to apply it specifically here to, again, this cocktail for us today. So we've got our margarita here on this black velvet styling backdrop. If you want links to that, I've got it down below, as well as all of my gear. If you're looking for more information on lighting, I'm not going to go into that here, but I'll link some helpful videos down below. But I've got my 31-inch by 47-inch softbox with the front diffusion removed, so I get a little bit more specularity and punch going on, and I am backlighting that drink because then we get that really beautiful glow coming through our margarita. But you'll see the first time that I shot this, and had I not been using focus stacking, that to achieve the look that I wanted, I couldn't get the entirety of the drink in focus. You can see here that I've shot it and the front of the drink is in focus, but we're losing a lot of that lime and we're also losing all of the background. Like, it just feels like there's really not enough focus there for our eyes to lock onto that subject. And two, this issue is further pronounced because the angle that I'm shooting at. You know, I love to shoot drinks at that 3/4 angle because we get a lot of the sparkle, we get a lot of the magic of that backlighting. But the problem is that our depth of field, that area of focus, is fairly limited, even if we took that aperture higher, which again, I don't want to because I really like that atmosphere feel. And maybe you're wondering, is that real ice, Joni? No, not here today. I wanted to have plenty of time to play around and experiment. So we are working with that fake Trengrove ice, the good fake ice. Now there's a couple tools that make doing focus stacking a lot easier. The first of which is a tripod. And we have talked about tripods here on the channel before. If you've missed that video, I'll link it down below. But this is going to help to keep the camera in the same position from shot to shot. Whenever we're doing composite work where we're combining multiple images in post together, it just makes that job a lot easier if the camera is in the same position, that the subject is positioned at the same spot within the frame, that nothing is changing, except for in this case, we're shifting the focus, but everything else stays the same. It's going to make our job in post a lot easier. And along those same lines, also having a remote shutter release. So in this case, I use this little Yongnuo wireless system, which I've shared about here before. I'll link all the info on that below. But having some sort of way to fire the camera without touching it, because anytime we touch the camera, it's slightly moving it. Now, we may have to get in there and shift the focus. I'm going to show you that if you don't have some of these other additional features with your camera or other softwares, but ultimately, the less that we have to touch the camera, the better. So that's all the gear and the setup that I'm working with here today. Now, before I jump in and actually capture and show you how I get the focus stacked images, I'm excited to share with you that today's video is sponsored by Professional Photographers of America. Now, if you've spent time around this channel, you've heard me talk about PPA before and their amazing resources. And today I want to make sure to highlight both their photo care insurance as well as PPA EDU and the data loss recovery. When you join PPA, right off the bat, you got $15,000 of equipment insurance. And along with that, PPA updated the policy so that you also get full replacement coverage with a flat $350 deductible, or any sort of repairs for a $50 deductible, which you think about just the cost of those two things in insurance alone and the price of your membership, it's a no-brainer. PPA also has data loss recovery services for its photographers, so important in this digital day and age. This coverage is designed specifically for photographers and their small businesses with data loss recovery services and even your legal fees if you have an unhappy client, which I hope you don't. But if it ever happens, you know, PPA is on your side. And then obviously you're watching this video, so you know that education is important, and PPA EDU offers all sorts of different tutorials and lessons and resources that can help to improve your skills as a professional photographer. Their upgraded platform features 900 plus online videos, tutorials, personalized curriculums on how to grow your own business with topics like brand messaging, entrepreneurism, and so much more. So between the full replacement equipment insurance policy to the data loss recovery services, all of the education. I mean, I don't know what else you need to encourage you to become a member. I am a member. I have been for years, since before they started sponsoring videos here on this channel. It's an important part of being a professional photographer, is being affiliated with a professional organization. But wait, there's more. Like any good YouTube offer, there is also a discount code on that membership. If you follow the link down the description box below, you can get access to that membership for a discount. So go check that out and become a part of this community. Whether you are just getting started or you have been a professional photographer for a long time, don't go it alone. Join PPA. Thanks again to PPA for sponsoring this video. Now let's jump into that focus stacking. So I'm going to walk you through two different ways to capture these focused stacked images. Again, the idea being that we're going to set our focus kind of nearest to us at the front of the subject. So in this case on the margarita, at the front of the glass. And then we're going to shift the focus little by little, taking successive shots until we get to the back of the drink so that we get that focus throughout. Now the method that you choose to do this will be largely dependent on the camera that you're working with, as well as potential investment in other softwares. But here for me, what's nice is on the Nikon Z7, I actually have what's called focus shift mode. It's a special setting here in the camera that effectively takes care of the focus stacking for me. So here on the Z7, you can see I am set up for my shot. I am gonna go ahead and place the focus here at the front of the subject. If you have missed my Getting Sharp Focus video, I'm gonna highly recommend that. If you don't have a real firm grasp of focus at this point, it is gonna make some of this a little more challenging. So go back and watch that video and then come back. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move my little marker here and I'm gonna do the little zoom in feature so I can make sure that I've got that tack sharp focus right where I want it at the front of the glass. We can see that salt on the rim perfectly in focus. Okay, so we're good there. Now what I wanna go ahead and do is hop into the menu, and we're gonna be in the shooting menu, and we're in the focus shift shooting. Again, what's really nice is if you have a camera that automates this for you, it takes out a lot of the manual work that you'll see in the other method that you absolutely can do if you don't have these settings in your camera. You can do this by hand, and I'm gonna show you in a little bit how to do that. So we can see here in the focus shift menu, we have all these various options, including starting the process, which we're not quite ready for, the number of shots. Now, this is a question that comes up when we do focus stacking. How many different images do I want to shoot? How many do I need? So the minimum is 2, the maximum in this case being 40. You know, I always like to err on the side of having more than not enough, because in theory, if we only take 2 on this particular drink setup, the front and the back, there's gonna be a gap in the middle, and we wanna eliminate that if possible. We really want that focus throughout. So the number of shots that you're gonna take is gonna be dependent on the subject that you're shooting, also how close close up to it you're shooting, how many of those various layers, also the aperture that you're shooting. In this case, I'm at f3.5. I want that really nice softness on the periphery. And so in that case, for this particular shot, I'm gonna select 20. Again, the camera's gonna automate it for me, so that makes it a little easier. That might be overkill, but you know, welcome to overkill, right? So we just select number of shots, and I'm already at 20, so that looks great. And then the other setting that I like to change here is the interval until next shot. So this is what is the duration from one shot to the next. Now, I would say the faster we can take these shots, the better, especially if we're dealing with something like a melting ice, which is not much of a problem here. But food changes, things shift, so kind of the faster that we can get through those images, the better. But in this case too, I'm also shooting with a strobe. Now, this is a very fast strobe. I've got a full battery on it, so I'm not worried as much about that recycle time. But if you're shooting with a speed light or any sort of light with some sort of delay, you want to make sure to accommodate enough time for that so you don't end up with exposure issues or differences from shot to shot. So in this case, just to be extra safe, I'm going to select 2 seconds. So it's going to be enough time, and I've got the beep on my light so I can audibly hear if it's recharged and it's ready to take another shot. So we've got that 2 seconds, hit OK. And so now effectively I am ready to start shooting. So again, let's go back out here. Let's make sure that that focus is exactly where I've wanted it, that I also have my exposure set to exactly what I want it to be. In this case, because I'm shooting with flash, I'm at 1/200th of a second. My camera's sync speed to help eliminate the ambient light. I'm at f3.5. This particular camera goes down to ISO 64, so that's what I'm at. And so I am effectively all set up, ready to go. So let's go ahead and hit that focus shift shooting, and I'm gonna hit start. And now at this point, the camera's gonna take over the job, and you're gonna see it's going to shoot 20 shots. And what it's doing is it's successively shifting that focus from shot to shot, hopefully throughout the entirety of the drink. So when we get into Photoshop to combine them, we have all of the focus there on the drink. So now it's captured all 20 images, and real quick, if we hop into the camera and we just look at the very final shot in that series of 20 and we look at where did the focus land? Ah, there, it's at the back of the drink on that back ice cube, which is exactly what I wanted, right? Because that means that the focus has moved from the front of the glass where it started through those 20 shots all the way to the back of the drink, which is perfect. Now, one quick note, if you are a regular on this channel and you notice I'm not shooting tethered today, that's because the Z7 focus shift doesn't work when you're shooting tethered. Just a little funny thing, but that's okay. We don't always have to shoot tethered, right? Now, like I mentioned, there's another way to do this, that maybe your camera doesn't have a focus stacking feature as a part of it, or the focus shift feature. There's actually 2 different ways. Another way is with a software called Helicon Focus and Helicon Remote. So that is an additional software, paid software, that does effectively the same exact thing. It automates that process of shifting the focus for you. They've got some great tutorials on their channel if you want to check that out, see if that pricing's worth it to you. It is something that if you are doing this work regularly and this becomes important to your workflow, it would be worth investing in. But if you're like, I don't want extra softwares, I don't have these features in my camera, what do I do? We can do this by hand. So I'm going to start off, I'm turning on my remote shutter release so that I can fire the camera without pushing the shutter button. Now we are going to be physically touching the camera from shot to shot, and we can solve that problem in post, but I definitely recommend, if you are doing this manual method, to try to move the camera as little as possible. This is also why having a really nice, sturdy, firm tripod that's not going anywhere, great stability going on, highly, highly recommended. So what we're gonna start off with is come on in here and go back to where we started by moving that focus to the front of the glass. So again, that little zoom in feature, that magnifying glass, game changer of a move right there, right? So we make sure the front of the drink is in focus. And then I'm gonna go ahead and fire a shot. And then I'm gonna come in here and I'm just going to ever so slightly shift the focus backward, move it manually just a little further back. Again, making sure to be as careful as possible not to move the camera. And then we're just going to continue to do that process one after the next until we've effectively covered the entirety of the drink. Now, because we're doing this manually, this is gonna take a little bit more time and finessing and finagling. Like, I see that I already ripped through that in like 6 shots. So you remember the focus stacked image, it took 20. Again, not necessarily because we need 20, but you may find that you need to refine those adjustments, really get familiar with adjusting your focus ring. So that is something that if you're gonna do this manual method, be sure to give yourself plenty of time to experiment, play with it. Don't like set up some sort of elaborate scene, like test this out on something simple. So now we have all of our captured images and I have loaded them here into Lightroom. If you're new to Lightroom, I've got some videos linked down below you can go check out to get familiar with the software. We can see we have all of our images. Now, interestingly enough, number 13, oh, it's unlucky 13, ended up with a misfire or something happened there, flash didn't go off, so we ended up with a black screen. But that's okay, we've still got plenty of images. So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete that one, remove him from Lightroom. So now if we go into the develop module and we can see if we start at shot number 1, front is in focus here, right? It's even a little bit further in front of the lip. But then if we jump all the way to the end of it, we can see the back. Perfect. So that's exactly what we were going for. And if we just sort of step through these, you can see how the focus just step by step shifts a little further forward. Pretty darn nifty, but you're like, okay, great, but what do we do with it now? So what I wanna go ahead and do is do all of my edits. So now that we have all of those edits done, we have our images ready to go. Now it's time to take it over into Photoshop to create that composite, to combine them all together. So what we can do from here is go ahead and make sure you've selected the very first in the group and then hold down the Shift key and select the very last in the group, and that will highlight all of them. And then I am gonna right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Very important to make sure that we're working in layers so that they are all being combined into the same image. So let's go ahead and jump over to Photoshop. Also, fair warning, depending on how many layers you capture, how many different images we're trying to load, this can take a while. This is that point in the process when you decide, should I go get a cup of coffee? Do I have time for a cup of coffee? So now all those images are loaded as layers here in Photoshop. We can see all of that here on the right-hand side, that if we just zoom in here, we can see each of these layers, we can turn them off. Like here's the top layer, we turn that off, and we can see how the focus starts to shift forward. Slowly but surely, we have so many layers. Much to the frustration and consternation of my computer. We can see how that focus starts to shift forward throughout all of those successive images. We'll go ahead and turn all of those back on. So now the first thing we want to do is go ahead and make sure that all these images and all of these layers are properly aligned, not in terms of necessarily the edges of the frame, but in terms of the subject matter, that we want Photoshop to make sure that everything is properly lined up in case there was like a bump at the camera or things slightly shifted. 2, as focus shifts, it does alter sort of some of the items on the periphery in the image. It does shift things around a little bit. So what we're going to go ahead and do is select on that top layer and then select down on the bottom layer. And then we're going to go ahead and go up to Edit and go ahead and do Auto Align Layers. Allow Photoshop to do the hard work for us, right? This is why we live in 2021. It's a beautiful time to be alive. Let's hit the auto, and it's going to analyze all of those images and make sure that they are properly aligned so that when we do the composite, that nothing's out of place. All right, so now Photoshop has done the work of aligning all those layers, and one thing we'll notice down here is if there was any sort of shifts somewhere on one of the edges, you may end up with a little gap. So that's what we've got down here. We can see that maybe a couple of the layers were off, created this little gap. So we want to just go ahead and crop in on that to eliminate that difference. So I'm just going to come in ever so slightly. There we go. And we're cropped. Outstanding. And I will probably end up also additionally cropping this depending on where we're placing this image. Excellent. So now we are all properly aligned. Everything's ready to go. So now ready to create our composite. So all we do is kind of repeat what we did before in the auto align layers, but instead we're going to blend them together. So select our first shot, hold down the Shift button and go ahead and select the last one. Go back up to Edit and we're going to auto blend layers. Excellent. And we want to go ahead and select stack images, have the seamless tones and colors turned on, as well as the content aware fill, transparent areas. And we're going to hit OK and let Photoshop do the work. See, this is, we just sit here and let Photoshop do the work. Granted, it's not the speediest sometimes. Sometimes it takes its sweet time, especially too when you're like, did I need to take 20 images? I could have probably gotten away with 10. Like, this is taking a long time. Sorry, computer. I know it's a lot to process. But what Photoshop is doing right now is actually quite impressive. What it's doing is taking each of those individual layers, analyzing the focus area, creating masks on top of that to reveal those specific areas, and then combine them all into one final image. If you only had 1 or 2, maybe 3 images, you could absolutely do this manually. But once we get into such minutia and little small details, especially for these kind of closer up subjects, when you're dealing with landscapes and things further away, it's a little easier to do this process manually. But for this particular image, and probably a lot of the images you're creating, you're gonna want the software to do the work for you. All right, here's where we say a little prayer that it did it all right. Oh, look what it did. Great job, Photoshop. Bravo, bravo. So if we go up here, we can see here is our new merged image. So if we zoom in, we can see here, okay, we've got the ice, we've got this is in focus, all in focus throughout, focus to about here. Now it didn't go all the way to the back, so this is where you kind of, you can kind of finesse it and take your time. But I will say, like, that is enough depth of focus that I feel like it makes sense, that I can really decipher the subject, yet we still have all of that really nice creamy bouquet in the background. If you notice, if we went back to that very first image that was not focus stacked, like we only got a little sliver of the line because of the perspective and the positioning, whereas here we really get so much more of that beautiful garnish, which, we've got that glow coming through. We can see all those little segments. That just makes me so incredibly happy. And so you can see here too, if we just go down, look at each of those individual layers, how it's created a mask. And if we remember, if you spent any time in Photoshop, that we use black to conceal, white to reveal. So if you look at this little mask that's right here, you can see that it's revealed just kind of these little pieces and edges of what's in focus. And you can kind of go back through, and again, you can see this would take a lot manually to do this. Now, if in the event, and this happens absolutely, if you find that Photoshop isn't doing a great job on your image, which happens, especially as we're working with these smaller, like minutia details of images and things like that, then it might be a compelling reason to go check out Helicon Focus, which anybody who's used that software and does focus stacking frequently will tell you it's a phenomenal software and is even further refined in its accuracy in the way that it's built. It's built specifically for focus stacking, so you can imagine how much better it is in certain respects. But for the most part, I have always found great success here using these features in Photoshop. So that's great if you already have Photoshop, but if you are looking to do this regularly or want to check out that software, I'll have it linked down below. But so at this point, this image is complete for me, ready to be shared with the world. So all I have to do at this point is hit that Control S or Command S, depending on if you're PC or Mac. And that's going to bring it then back over here into the library, over into Lightroom, keeping it safe and sound with all those other images. And then from there, I just export like usual. If you need help with the export process, I have a video on that too. I got videos on everything. So my sincere hope is that if you had heard of focus stacking before this video, but you'd been intimidated by it or weren't sure where to start, that hopefully now this has get you excited to be behind the camera, to give it a go, try it out for yourself. If you do, feel free to tag me over on Instagram. I'm at The Bite Shot. I always love to see what you're working on and celebrate those wins. Thank you again so much to PPA for sponsoring this video. You can check out that link in the description box below for that discount on membership. But with that, I hope you have a fantastic day. You stay out of trouble, and I'll see you soon, all right? Bye.